in the event that your office goes down, you lose internet, you have the ability to still dial out, receive calls, and transact business until connectivity is restored.
Also, while having deep analytics into what's going on in my calls,
Correct.
understanding who's saying what, and what's resonating with people.
Correct.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. Welcome to Unraveling IT, Expert Tech Talks. My name's Nate Troyer. I'm an account executive with Corsica Technologies. I'm here today with Garrett Wiesenberg. Garrett, what's your role here at Corsica Technologies?
I am the VP of Solution Consulting.
Great. Today we're discussing a pretty interesting topic with the advent of cloud-based solutions. I'm actually pretty excited to speak with you today about VoIP, voice over IP with cloud solutions. So let's just start with the basics. For folks not familiar, what exactly is Microsoft Teams VoIP calling, and how does it differ from like the older traditional phone systems?
Well, so Microsoft Teams is a cloud-based calling solution that has been around for quite a few years now and has really begun to sort of pick up traction in many businesses that are already heavily leveraging the Microsoft platform. It's a natural sort of integration to the existing M365 email, Microsoft Teams collaboration. It just expands on that into calling, and it differs from some of the solutions of the past by, number one, the fact that it's a cloud-based solution. Solutions, the days long gone, were on-prem, at times difficult to manage. They didn't necessarily come with some of the feature sets.
What are some of the pain points of some of those? Not to take anything away from those systems. They're premium systems, but what were some of the pain points of, like Cisco UC, like gold standard?
Yep.
What were some of the pain points there that Teams is looking to essentially remedy?
Yeah. So if we're specifically looking at Cisco Call Manager UC, it was a high entry cost, right? You have to buy your own hardware, you have to run your own software, you have to bring analog phone lines into your facility, or SIP or PRI, whatever it may be, into your facility, and pay for all of these different subscription fees, as well as the physical hardware, handsets, everything at everyone's desk. So with that would come pretty high overhead in terms from a management perspective, because you're not only managing, license renewals and contracts, but you're also managing hardware life cycles. And there's just a lot of points within the architecture that could fail, or that could cause more catastrophic failures. Most of the on-prem providers of days long gone, like Cisco, ShoreTel, NEC, have all kind of come out with their own cloud-based, SaaS-based type solutions. Like Cisco has moved to WebEx calling, which is their, not only collaboration platform, but also their calling platform. Similar to what Microsoft Teams-based chat is to Microsoft Teams calling. They have their own, flavor of it. And that's kind of what we've seen in the industry. That's the trend, is that more and more often clients are coming to Corsica and just asking, what can we do? We have this outdated, antiquated phone system that worked and kind of works, but we're really looking to see what exists today. How do we modernize, our calling? What are we missing out on by, staying on-prem?
Do you see that maybe some of these solutions were adopted for their feature sets that probably aren't now actually being utilized? Like they looked great on paper, but then after the implementation, 10 years ago, they were never really utilized to their fullest extent. So they weren't getting the return on investment they thought they were going to get. Is that sometimes part of the equation too?
I'd say
I'm thinking about like reporting, right? Like,
I would say it's probably part of the conversation or the equation, as you kind of put it. But I'm not sure that it's the primary driver.
What do you think is the primary driver?
So I think it's just phone systems are one of those items that it's a pain to transition away from. Right. Everybody knows it's a huge pain to move your phone system from one provider to another, because the phone system is the lifeblood of the organization. So there's not only cost to moving it, but there's also, I'll say soft costs from we have to retrain all of our employees. We have to, not lose any business. Calls need to continue coming in, and everybody needs to be ready to go day one. And so phone systems in general aren't something that get replaced, every 3 to 5 years, like you would typically see with maybe, server equipment, networking equipment, or other, IT components like computers and things.
Okay.
Phone systems typically stay in place for very long periods of time, and companies as long as they're happy with the performance, aren't necessarily looking to replace that phone system. So oftentimes what I see is that an organization is happy with their phone system, but they also don't know what exists today. And there's an architectural difference and feature disparity between what you could do on premise and what you can do in a SaaS-based solution. It comes down to a lack of not knowing what exists and what's out there.
And for everybody that's watching, what does SaaS mean?
Software as a service.
Okay.
So someone else is hosting whatever application you may have.
And I think that's a kind of a great segue into the idea that a lot of people are already using Teams for calling and collaboration. What's the difference between the teams that they're using and Teams calling? Like, what's the difference there in the Teams phone system?
Realistically, not much. So the Teams chat interface that people are used to day in and day out or leveraging already is the exact same interface you're going to use to make calls. If you're looking at the Teams chat, interface, there's a call section on the left-hand side. Everybody's probably familiar with that. If you don't leverage Teams calling today, that functionality on the left-hand side, for the most part, is only going to exist for internal calls and things of that nature. All you do when you implement Teams calling is enable the ability to dial out and receive calls from external sources.
I mean, that seems all very straightforward, but what should the businesses keep in mind before jumping into Teams VoIP? Like, are there any early hurdles or setup steps or anything like that you need to contemplate or plan out first before you end up doing this?
Well, I think with any deployment of any technological solution, there's always the budgeting aspect. With any SaaS-based solution, right? So somebody else is hosting it. You're paying a subscription fee to access those services. It changes the way that you have to budget. CapEx versus OpEx. So if you're okay with buying your own hardware and spending a lot of money up front, capitalizing it over a given period of time, this is going to be a completely different model, and you need to understand the costs that are going to be associated. There will be costs to also implement this solution, because from whatever provider you're with today, you have to migrate to Microsoft Teams, meaning you need to take your pool of numbers, right? Your primary phone line or anybody's direct phone number. You need to take those numbers from whomever owns them or is hosting them today and migrate them over to Microsoft. So there's a project involved with getting this up and running. It's not just something you go apply a license, flip a switch, and you're off to the races.
Can licensing also trip people up?
It can. There's a lot of different ways to leverage the Teams calling functionality. Microsoft can provide your dial tone, and they have a few different license types based on your needs and desires. Specifically, think of the cell phone plans of old. Do you want to pay for your minutes?
Well, my desire would be not to pay a thing for it.
I know, but
I don't think they have that plan.
You can pay for the minutes up front. So you could say, I'm going to use 2,000 minutes this month. Pay for that up front, and that's your budget. Additionally, they have packages that include a set number of minutes that allow you to call domestically, and then they'll have a different package that allows you to call internationally.
Oh, okay.
And so it depends on the use case and how you intend to leverage the system. But you can also leverage a third-party provider to really supply the dial tone. And so it depends on the use case scenario.
Well, it seems very flexible.
It's very flexible, and it can fit almost any circumstance and need or business outcome.
Okay.
It just depends on what your requirements are and what you're trying to get out of this system.
What hiccups do you normally see when someone tries to go through this implementation? Like they take on the responsibility of doing all these pieces.
A lack of understanding or planning is essentially just a way to quickly fail and have this go off the rails very quickly. There's a reason organizations don't typically migrate their phone systems often, because of the complexity involved and because of the potential risk of something going wrong. I mean, if you think about it, think of hospital migrating from Cisco on-prem to Microsoft Teams calling, for instance. If anything happens during that migration and they all of a sudden can't receive calls, patient care, potential deaths could arise. I mean, it could be very impactful and material and the devastation of losing this functionality. Whereas, maybe an office, right, a standard office like, the Corsica office, for instance, it wouldn't be as impactful, but it's still, if we can't receive calls from our clients, that's going to be a big issue. We can't support them.
With that being said, with the complexity that can come up in this and the need to be kind of excellent in the execution, where does Corsica fit into, adopting like Teams phone systems?
Corsica can fit in almost anywhere in the process. We can step in the planning stages where we are discussing, what is your system today? What are the requirements for a new system? And, what's it going to cost, or what is the cost going to look like? We can come in during the execution phase where we're helping, an organization to migrate, phone numbers, set up new call routing, schemas and things of that nature. And we can also come in from a support perspective where, day-to-day support of the system and management of the system, we can partner alongside an organization or help from that perspective.
I think one of the questions I was thinking of earlier today was, how do you secure, or how would Corsica secure, a phone system that doesn't exist on-prem, right? Yep. And I think in just talking with you before the episode, I think one of the immediate things we pointed out was like, how are these companies securing their current phone system? Because it's on-prem, and that tends to be intrinsically less safe than the cloud. So, yeah, I mean, walk me through how a company like ours would secure a Teams VoIP solution.
Well, I think, to some extent, the question implies that we have to implement security to the system, but with Microsoft, the security is already there. So Microsoft already is the largest identity provider. So the calling system is going to leverage Entra and MFA for access. It's going to make sure that calls are encrypted, whether through certificates or
Oh yeah, and like what devices can even call?
Yeah, exactly. Right? There are Teams certified devices that have to meet certain criteria in order to even join the systems. Microsoft is handling 100% of the security on their end, and they are heavily incentivized to ensuring that compromises and breaches do not occur. Because if there is a breach, there's potential that many customers are impacted across the entire globe, but also that's a huge loss of trust for them. And organizations may, go somewhere else at that point with their calling solutions.
So if I'm a VIP at an organization, say like in the C-suite or whatever, what experience can I expect? Moving from, like I said, Cisco UC, gold standard, right? I moved from this $750,000 solution that I bought 10 years ago that's been rock solid, but that I've paid a lot of soft costs for too. I have to have a guy on my staff that knows, or at least be in a support contract with somebody who knows how to fix it if it breaks, knows how to reconfigure it if I have any organizational changes. Like, what experience can I expect on a day-to-day basis when I go to use Teams over my former system?
Yeah, so your former system, you probably had Jabber, right? If we're talking Cisco specifically, there would have been some sort of communication type platform, whether texting, calling, simplification, maybe WebEx, depending on what iteration you were on with.
We actually as a company had Jabber and WebEx.
Yep. So depending on where you were at, it depends on what your experience was today. But the way it's going to differ primarily is the ease of calling, right? So a great example is every morning when I'm driving to work, I'm usually on a call with someone. The second I sit down at my desk, I'm able to transfer that call from my personal cell phone to the computer, and it's a seamless transfer, right? Because I'm moving directly from my personal cell phone with the Teams app installed there.
I would actually like to know how they do that, because that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know.
That's pretty cool. Just add this device.
Yeah, you can either
do the call in progress,
or you can transfer it to that device. Yeah. And so really the benefits or the experience is, if you're used to Microsoft Teams from a chat perspective, this just adds another layer on top of it that is the exact same sort of interface, functionality. I mean, we call internal employees, like I call you every day.
You call me what?
Well, I call you from Teams
Okay.
every day. And it's that same experience, except now instead of it only being allowed internally, you're taking it externally. So, if you're used to Teams, the experience is not going to be much different. If you're used to a different phone system, I mean, the biggest thing that I discuss with clients is the need for handsets. It's funny because typically, like we all don't have handsets. There's not a single handset in the Corsica office.
That's true, yeah.
We all use the soft phone or the application on our computer or on our personal cell phones. A lot of organizations still want that physical handset that they have to pick up and that they can talk on and that they need to,
that tactile,
that tactile feedback. And that's fine. They make devices for that, but Teams is really designed to kind of begin to get away from that, right? It's leveraging the application itself. And if you look at these phones, all they are is a piece of equipment with a screen that is running the Teams application on it.
Teams is just software.
Yeah, it's just software running on that hardware.
So it's like a small little computer that happens to have a microphone and a speaker.
Yep, and there are some use cases where, maybe it makes sense more than others. Maybe a receptionist, for instance, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. But there's even software applications that can give receptionists the sort of full functionality of, the receptionist phone days of old, right? With all those sidecars attached, and you hit a button and it can transfer to that person quickly. There's pieces of software that can make that experience for the receptionist similar and even more feature rich than what they've had in the past.
Okay, so for organizations that have the need, maybe they have multi-generational staff, right, and who are very used to doing it in a certain way, they can have a handset, they can have that tactile feedback. Meanwhile, people that are born in the 90s who are used to touch screens for everything, they don't need one. So you can cut down on the cost of your system by removing the need for a lot of handsets.
Yeah, you remove the need for a lot of handsets, and there may still need to be hardware involved. So, a great example is faxing. Right, that's a question that usually comes up during these migrations as well. Is what do we do about our faxing? Well, if you're paying for analog lines coming into your current facility, you could continue to pay for those lines, and there's a piece of equipment that will convert the analog signal to a digital signal and connect it to Microsoft Teams.
So there's a way forward if
there's a way forward for that, or you can migrate to an e-faxing solution, which is often what we try and recommend or help understand.
Like email, but for faxing.
Yeah, exactly, email but with faxing.
Okay.
And so there's options even from that perspective.
What about, and we're probably going down a rabbit hole, but since there's a lot of manufacturing where we're at in the Midwest, is there any support for when you need to have like a speaker out in the
paging?
Paging. I don't often page, but anyway, is there an option for that too?
There is. There's options to integrate the existing systems you may already have, depending on the age of that system, because again, paging is also something that typically doesn't get replaced often. So what we found is, especially with manufacturers, they've got an older paging system. Depending on make, model, age, things of that nature.
And they use it in hospitals.
Yeah, we may not be able to, integrate it, and if we can't, we can help you go through options for ways around it or ways to implement new solutions.
It all seems very flexible. Like
it's a very flexible system that can integrate into almost any ecosystem. And a great example is, Teams calling 5 years ago, we probably would not have recommended for call centers because there just was not a lot of in-depth reporting available at the time inherent within Teams. So to get around that, we had some workarounds and things we could have done in the past. But today, for instance, there is a plethora of options when it comes to advanced feature sets and capabilities. And a great example is our own service desk. We have our own call center.
Yep.
We leverage Microsoft Teams Calling now, and we leverage Microsoft Dynamics on top of Teams Calling to give us the analytics that we need. And certain examples would be, we can measure sentiment live as a call is occurring. So client calls in, they're talking to one of our service desk team members. If the client starts getting frustrated for whatever reason, it's going to send up an alert to the service desk manager saying, hey, we have a call, something may be going on, you should probably take a look. The manager can sit in on that call then and make sure things are going smoothly. They can help. They can jump in and help. But also from a reporting perspective, we can report on absolutely any metric you could ever imagine because of the depth of Teams integrating with Dynamics. And so it's this entire ecosystem that just works so well together that Microsoft has built. And, again, for organizations that are already leveraging a lot of the Microsoft features and functionality, I cannot stress how beneficial Teams calling can be, or, where you could even go with it, because the options are almost limitless.
So if I'm in the C-suite again, I'm going to have a better experience because I'm going to have a mobile VoIP application. Basically, I can make calls wherever I am.
And
I can take calls wherever I am.
And it's not dependent upon your physical office location, meaning in the event that your office goes down, you lose internet, tornado comes through and wipes it out, you have the ability to still dial out, receive calls, and transact business day in and day out until connectivity is restored.
Also, while having deep analytics into what's going on in my calls,
Correct.
understanding who's saying what and what's resonating with people.
Correct.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. My name's Nate Troyer, again, account executive. Garrett, what's that long title of yours?
VP Solution Consulting.
You heard it here, folks.
It's great to be here, Nate.